Hello everyone, I'm Tom, and I lead Acumen's Lean Data team. Now is the exciting part of the day where we're going to look at impact numbers, a few charts, and hopefully you'll be as excited as I am when I flash you a 30-foot chart later on. So this is a quote that gets me out of bed every morning. This is from the G7 Task Force on Impact Investing, who tell us that impact measurement is the backbone of impact investing. I'm here to tell you that, sadly, that high-quality impact measurement remains the exception rather than the norm in impact investing, which is disappointing in many ways. But in fairness, there are some good reasons for it. Impact measurement has to date probably earned its slightly stuffy reputation. It's tended to be complex, slow, and extraordinarily expensive. It's classically almost as expensive to do high-quality impact measurement as it is to invest in these companies. And therefore, very few companies are doing this work. And that was the reason we invented Lean Data. Lean Data is trying to change this. We realized that expensive impact management that is not driving significant value to its companies is unlikely to scale. And if we want to create the backbone of our sector and create proper impact measurement, we'd have to do things a little bit differently. So Lean Data, I can talk about that a little bit more later in the breaks, but it's built on four important things. First is customer voice. Impact measurement certainly starts, it almost ends, but it certainly starts with listening to customers, listening to people who are experiencing goods and services that our companies sell and hearing their lived experience. Unfortunately, too many people in impact investing assume that the changes they make and assume that people are experiencing change. Driving down the costs, we've done two things. We've invested heavily in remote surveying. To the best of my knowledge, I think that Acumen is now the world's leader in using different types of remote surveying to understand social performance. We've tested more types of technologies. We've tried different ways of collecting data through remote surveying. And now the rest of the sector are looking to us as a real expert in this area. The other part of Lean Data is, and perhaps the least sexy part of impact measurement, here a lot of people talk about big data, it's going to be impact investing. Actually, surveys are what impact measurement boils down to. The trouble with surveys is that most of these surveys are kept on academic C drives. And actually, for a company trying to do this work, they have to reinvent the wheel each time. They have to develop a new survey. And one of the difficult things about that is actually there's a real art to developing high-quality surveys. But in addition to that, if everyone's asking questions in different ways, we're never going to get to a point in which we can start to compare social impact across different companies. So we go big on standardizing surveys. And the last thing is we tend to blend social and more general customer insights. If you're talking to customers, there's a real opportunity to collect things like net promoter scores, customer effort scores, and general customer insights that help our companies grow. So we've been on a real mission with Lean Data. It started in 2004 with a handful of pilots, got a bit of momentum in 2015, and in 2016 really started to break through as the majority of our companies undertaking Lean Data. So far in 2017, we're well on course to doing more than 100 Lean Data projects, and that's a team of 10 people working across the world implementing these projects with more than 60 social enterprises. We'll have talked to probably more like 25,000 customers by the end of the year. And what's most exciting is that we're starting to see revalidation for Lean Data in the market. Other funds and other foundations are coming to us and saying, hey, this seems to be working. We've had a problem with impact measurement for ages too, and would you help us? So folks like Midjan Network they were early adopter of Lean Data and have been an extraordinary partner. We're seeing folks like Injaro Investments, Energy Access Ventures, Dune Foundation, the Soros Economic Development Fund, Gates Foundation, and others come to us and start to ask for our work. Our work's been published again in Stanford Social Innovation Review this year, and there's even a Harvard HBS case study on Lean Data. So there's some momentum here around Lean Data, which is exciting to see. I want to tell you about one really special project this year and show you some information around our impact, which I hope we'll have a talk back afterwards. I hope we can discuss. But this year we wanted to, as we've heard a lot about our energy investing, go really deep into a sector. And a first for impact investing is to say, well, what does it really take to look at a whole sector, a whole portfolio, and collect data at the same time across all these portfolio companies in a way that can start to collect the same information and start to compare our impact. So we worked with these 10 companies at the time, which were Acumen's energy portfolio. All of them said that they were very keen to do this. We never forced Lean Data on our companies. They all said that they would like to be involved in this. And in the process, we asked baseline and endline surveys of new customers to find out what it was like before they got one of these products and what was it like 3 months or 4 months later after using it for a while. We blended a few metrics. We used our own metrics that we developed in Lean Data. We used some of the global off-grid lighting association metrics and also the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stove. What is particularly exciting about this is it's sort of the first big data set on impact measurement in impact investing. We've got almost 750,000 data points in this, and so I'm going to show you some parts of it, but we are delving deeper and deeper and learning from this data. And what's perhaps the holy grail of impact measurement is to create benchmarks of impact, so that you can start, just like with financial performance, where we start to compare one organization's financial performance to another. That's very familiar to all of us. We know how to do that. We can't currently do that with impact measurement, but if we start to create impact benchmarks, we might start to do that. So here's my first 30-foot chart, and let me talk you through it and explain why it excites me so much. So we really focus on 3 things at Acumen: the breadth of impact, number of people reached, the depth of impact, and I'll talk about that in a minute, about the lived experience of people who get our products and services, and also whether or not we're penetrating into markets to reach the poor. So this is a market of, on the y-axis, the percentage of people living in the population, and different international poverty lines, from those living right down the bottom to those all the way at the max. And this is the population of India. So the question we wanted to ask ourselves is, look, we're targeting people living in poverty, but how far can companies like this go in terms of reaching the poorest? Are they working in this area here, which is the group of people in extreme poverty? Well, I think probably not. This is an area for people working on subsistence, experiencing pure charity, or even humanitarian assistance. Are they serving the 5% or so of Indians who are lucky enough to be in the middle and wealthy classes? Well, hopefully not again. That's not what we're here to do. We're not here to get goods and services. I mean, it's okay if they buy them, but that's not specifically our mission to get them here. But that's a big part of the population. And if you're thinking about a company who is entering this market, they probably think, well, that's where the biggest economic purse is. You know, we're a typical company. We'll target those guys. And you might find that a company like that had a customer curve that looked a little bit like this underneath the average population here. Now, if we're not in either of those two, where are we? Well, most of impact investing is actually, the current norm is to think we're targeting the emerging middle classes, and there's good reasons to think that. These markets are incredibly difficult to build. There aren't distribution channels. There are new customers buying these products and services for the first time. It doesn't make sense to target the emerging middle classes, which have a bit more money, are likely to be first adopters, and then build a profitable business and go downstream. And that is what we hear time and time again. And that is the strategy of a lot of well-established impact investing funds. Indeed, the IFC talks about targeting people living on less than $11 a day, and folks like Leapfrog think about people targeting people less than living on $9 a day. And if you were to do that, you'd get a customer poverty profile line that looks something like this, with sort of 80% of your customers living above the $6 line and in that emerging middle class and middle and wealthy. But Acumen, we've always talked about this group here. We've always talked about patient capital, about standing with the poor, about how can we get into targeting groups of people that are living in poverty or low income. And we've always had confidence that we're doing this, but we've never had the data in quite the way we're starting to get it to really understand this. So I'm going to show you some real data from 3 of our companies in the energy sector, all in India, and see how they're doing. These are our companies. And I want to say 3 things about these things that I think are really exciting, pretty thrilling to me. One is that they're here, they're in the green space, right? That these companies, one of them is up to 85% of their customers are selling to people low income poverty, and maybe a few in extreme poverty, but that's great. And they're all heavily concentrated in this space. So actually, for those people that said you can't do that, you have to start in the emerging middle classes and work down, we're actually seeing if your company get the right company, the right capital, and the real grit and determination to work with these customers, you can get there and you can start serving people with these extraordinary technologies from the beginning. So that's really exciting. The other thing is that it's different, right? We're all looking, we want to understand, it's not good enough, I don't think, in terms of impact measurement. We all get so excited about, and in the financial world, about differences in IRR that can be a handful of basis points. Well, we actually want to understand there's the same rigor, differences in social performance. And so there's some variation here. And that starts to ask us interesting questions about, can we get the folks in yellow closer to the folks in orange, and how do the folks in orange get all the way to serving, get all the way to the white line? And lastly, the last thing is this data isn't just for us. This data is actually breaking down some myths in the sector and also for other people to use. I used to work for the Department for International Development, that's the UK equivalent of USAID, and I've showed this to my colleagues here. And what I found really interesting is this kink down here. We expected not to be getting into perhaps the poorest, but this data actually demonstrates for this for the first time. And if you think about organizations like that looking at the SDGs, and one of them is to have universal access to energy, this sort of information demonstrates the importance that subsidy might play for organizations like that to make sure that everyone can experience these goods and services. So that was understanding whether or not we're reaching the poor, and there's some really exciting data here. Perhaps the hardest thing to do is actually to understand people's lived experience, how much depth of change has happened to people, how much has their well-being improved or not. And at Acumen, we do things here slightly differently, although there's a growing number of people that are starting to do it the same way, which is we don't assume that we know how people's lives have changed. We root our impact work in listening. We listen to people and they tell us, we collect huge amounts of qualitative data and we start to code that about what things how have their lives changed. And we build our impact measurement based on that. So this work with all these companies has produced data sets which have sort of anywhere between 15, 20, sometimes 25 metrics. Spider charts get very difficult to read if you have 25 odd metrics here. But we picked some of the ones that our customers say are most important to them. So here are some. So the top one is the quality of life indicator. It's a general sort of social NPS score that we've developed. We hear customers tell us again who are using our energy products that better lighting, getting up the energy ladder is very important to them. Customers in the market often experience a paradox of poverty. They are spending way more on energy than you or I are for inferior goods. That's something that happens to people living in poverty often. And so people talk about the importance of changing their spending, and we find that people spend about 10% of their incomes on energy products. So if you can find a way to reduce that, there's a lot of extra disposable income that you can create. We're pretty interested in CO2. So sometimes we do pick metrics, CO2 savings, sometimes we do pick metrics that are important to us. And here's one that's really interesting. We've heard over and over again, which was a surprise to us, that people talked about the improvements in personal safety and security that come from using off-grid lighting sources. So this I'll show you an image that's helping us to understand differences in social performance across companies. And just to explain this, if you look at the spider chart, if you're in the blue area here, you're above 1x, you're above the benchmark, and you're creating outsized impact. If you're in this light gray area, you're above 0 and between 1, and so you're creating impact, but it's undersized impact compared to the benchmark. And then there is a possibility, and it's sort of always washed over, that actually we can create negative impact. Not all changes are always going to be beneficial to people, and if we go searching just for stories of our own improved impact, we're going to miss out that actually sometimes there can be unexpected changes. So I want to show you, firstly, one of our companies and how it's doing. So here's a company. And our first company to show you that's doing well in different ways, right? It's really doing very well. It's creating outsized impact in terms of improving people's perception of safety. People are getting up the energy ladder, and they're saying that overall their quality of life has improved. Maybe less CO2 savings. And because this is an relatively expensive product, people aren't yet making savings. That might not always be the case. These are new. This is someone who's had this product for 4 months, and so they might. Or on average, these are people who had the 4 months. They might start to save once they've paid off the costs of the initial thing. Now, I'm spending a lot of time with spider diagrams, but where I think it gets really exciting is when we start to look across the portfolio. And now we can start to say, well, we're really comparing social impact based on people's lived experience and seeing how that differs from company to company. Two things that I think are really interesting here. Firstly, that we see that there are differences, right? And we see such dramatic differences. This is bigger differences seemingly to me than I had expected. A lot of people will think, well, again, back to this point of we get very excited about differences in financial returns, but why would we be so excited about social impact? We're getting off-grid energy. We're getting energy to people who are off-grid in Africa and India. Of course, that's impact. Well, actually, if you're going to be serious about this work, if we're going to really look at this and ask ourselves difficult questions about where capital is deployed to create the most impact, when we look at charts like this, it starts to say, well, actually, there is differences in impact here. And we create different types of impact depending on the context in which people are getting these goods and services. So that was a real eye-opener for us, and actually it emphasizes the importance of collecting original data from people and understanding social performance. The other thing is now you've got these different shapes, and we can also look at these in tables and numbers, and we can start to rank social performance of companies. And so just like we typically will look at the best, as Sachin showed earlier, our best financial performance, we can also look at companies by our best social performance as well. There are many, many more spider charts, and I'm looking at loads of different spider charts all the time at this work. I'll leave you with a few last thoughts. So understanding social impact isn't a one-off thing. It is actually something where it's a journey of learning all the time. And so we've learned some really important things, not just for ourselves, but also hopefully for the sector, and demonstrated the relevance of doing this work at a more and more rigorous standard. So hopefully getting closer to creating a backbone for us, for impact investing. 3 areas we're going to be looking at, particularly in energy going forwards, is looking at the questions of affordability and over-indebtedness. There's a lot of excitement in the markets right now about pay-as-you-go solar, about financing, which is that's driving sales. But just like microfinance a while ago, getting people who have people living in poverty additional credit could have negative implications. And so we really want to understand that and help our companies understand that and what they might do if there is evidence of that to avoid that. A lot of people talk about whether or not these products and services help people create micro businesses. Again, less is known about that. We really want to start investigating how these products and services are creating productive uses of energy. And lastly, gender dynamics. We currently collect good data on household level, but to really understand, back to we're now learning about reaching people at different levels of poverty, but do we also understand intra-household effects, and are women and men experiencing energy in the same way, and what impact might we have between both? So lots more to learn. That's just a snapshot of some of the information. We will be producing more of this in an impact report later this year, but I think we've now got a question set, and we can dive into some of this in more detail. Thank you very much.